Well, there's Pretty Swell sticking out the end there. That bit of stuff hanging out the front looks like it might be the cover to the bow seats, and my new Seanapps kept it on. So that might have been a good task to have done. There she is, comes off tomorrow.
Welcome back to the channel. This brief video is all about unloading Pretty Swell from the transport ship that brought it right here to the big port of Freeport, Bahamas, and then cruising it from there to Florida across the Gulf Stream. Climbing up the gangway and onto the ship puts you into a true industrial zone, full of boats sitting on cradles that were welded to the deck just for this trip, with straps and chains galore holding them down. The crew is working speedily to unload all the boats, which takes roughly half the time that loading took.
Well, and here it is. Just a quick shot showing that it made it, surrounded by a ton of other boats here in Freeport. So if you remember my snap replacement project, that project saved this cover. Even though it came off back to front, and that's the directions, the snaps on snap, they're a harder snap, and it saved it from blowing away. So, successful project.
That night before my offload, I had dinner at a local restaurant that feeds the sharks every hour during the evening. Good fun.
There's the baby. All right, ready for offload. Here we go.
And then it was Pretty Swell's turn. The loadmaster coordinated the crew to put the straps under the boat. And then the chief directed the crane operator to lift the boat over the side. At that point, by the way, I couldn't take much video, but it was pretty much the reverse of the load on. Our boat was lowered to the point where we could get on, and we rode it down to the water where the crew helped us unlash, and we cruised away. Again, apologies for no video of that, but I was busy. The next question was when to cross to Florida. The captain I hired to help me make my first Gulf Stream crossing said it had been blowing hard for several weeks. So much so the ferries weren't even running. As we looked out, the next several days were certainly looking like high winds and seas. But there was a window opening on the following Tuesday that looked like we could cross.
I've got some more video from Freeport and Florida coming shortly, but there's something I didn't take video of while I was down there that I wanted to share with you. First is, after we took the boat off the ship on Saturday, my captain had a friend with a dock that we could put it at for a couple of days waiting for a weather window. So I took it over there and tied it up. I left the house battery bank on because I wanted to leave the AIS transmitter running so I could track the boat. I was after all, in a port I wasn't familiar with, and I didn't know whether it was secure there or not. So I left the house battery bank on. I thought the AIS wouldn't drain very much battery. We came back Monday to go fill the boat with gas before we went to Florida. And lo and behold, when I turned on the nav system gave me like a 3 volts battery warning. What? House batteries are dead? Now, happily, I had the engine batteries on a separate bank, and so the engine started just fine. But we had to go over to the fuel dock without a radio, without a nav. Now, fortunately, the captain knew the waters really well. He's local. But when we got to the fuel dock, and after I filled up, I went ahead and rented a slip for the night so I could hook up to power. After I got back, I tried to figure out what was it that was draining the battery so fast. And do you remember that Starlink that I put on? Well, it turns out we installed the Starlink without a switch in the 12-volt circuit. And so that meant that while I was sitting there with no power coming to the boat, but running the house batteries, the Starlink was steadily and rapidly draining the batteries in the house. So the first lesson was put on a switch in the Starlink. We'll get that done between now and later.
Antares 11's come with an application called Seanapps, which allows both me and the dealer to see various sensors that are on the boat. It even sends alerts for low battery, which I would have received if I'd permitted push notifications for it on my phone. Sadly, I hadn't, and the battery drained slowly to a very low spot, as you can see here.
The next question was fuel planning. You'll remember from a prior video, this is about 100 gallons of tank, actually about 96 gallons of gas per tank, and the tanks don't cross-feed. That's okay. The question is range. Every boat has its own power curve or its own efficiency curve. You can get great gas mileage going 6, 7, 8 miles an hour when you're full displacement. And you can usually get pretty good gas mileage on a planing boat like the Antares 11. but there's this trough in the middle where your efficiency is really low. Here's a rough look at the graph of what that looks like on an Antares 11. So for our crossing going from Freeport to Florida, the question is, what kind of speed could we hold? Could we hold a good cruising speed and get across with a good mileage? Or were we going to get stuck in difficult seas and end up in that trough of terrible mileage down there? If we were in that trough, we might use as much as 150 gallons of gas trying to go across out of a 190-gallon tank. That doesn't leave much for reserve. Happily, as it turns out, the seas were going to look pretty good. We thought we could maintain a pretty good cruise speed, so we didn't carry any extra gas, but fuel planning was definitely something I had to think about.
The cruise to Florida took just over 3 hours. The sea was comparatively good with small 1 to 2 foot waves and 3 to 4 foot unorganized swells that bounced around the boat a little bit. But the Antares took it like a champ, and soon we were on the quiet water of the St. Lucie River. As we headed past Stewart to the marina where I planned to store the boat until Judy and I come down to cruise, I had to transit my first lock. Happily, Ryan, my co-captain, was very good in every way on this trip, and we got through the lock to the freshwater Okeechobee Canal without incident. So please hit the subscribe button below to get notifications when we get back to doing videos in Florida, and like this one to help the YouTube algorithm with suggestions and recommendations to others. I hope you're enjoying these, and happy cruising.